Matthew Hendricks had worked the night shift at the old gas station on Route 22 for years. It was the same kind of place that time forgot, rusted bumps flickering, neon lights, and an ever-so-present smell of gas, mixed with something Matthew could never quite place. The locals avoided it after dark, but it was his route. Now, clock in, stay awake, and count the hours until dawn. Tonight was different. It started with a thick fog that rolled in, smothering the station. In a blanket of white, Matthew barely noticed at first, engrossed in a sworn black paperback and the monotonous buzz of the fluorescent lights above. But the fog clung to the windows, thickening until he could no longer see the road. The silence that followed was oppressive, as if the world outside had ceased to exist. Then came the scratching. At first, it was like a faint branches tapping against the windows, but there was no trees near the station. The sound grew louder and more insistent until Matthew was sure it was coming from the back of the station. Near the supply shed, he hesitated, listening. The paperback now forgotten. The scratching stopped, replaced by a slow, dragging sound, as if something heavy was being pulled across the gravel. Matthew grabbed the flashlight from under the counter and stepped outside. The cool night air wrapping around him like a shroud. The fog swallowed him whole. The beam of the light barely penetrating the murk, he moved towards the supply shed, the dragging sound growing louder with each step. As he rounded the corner, the flashlight caught something, moving a long, sinuous shape that slithered out of sight behind the shed. Matthew's breath caught in his throat. He knew the stories, the old legends whispered by the town's elders about the Nora, a creature of Japanese mythology, a serpent with a head of a woman who lured men to their doom. But that was just the story, right? His heart pounded as he approached the shed, the dragging sound now ominously close. He reached for the door, his hands trembling, and slowly pushed it open. The flashlight flickered, casting a weak glow. Inside there was nothing, just rows of shelves and dusty tools. But then he heard a soft whisper, like a rustle of silk against the skin. Matthew, he spun around, the flashlight beaming, darting across the fog. Like the whisper came again, closer this time, a more feminine, calling voice, calling his name. Matthew. His pulse raced. He backed away from the shed, the fog closing in around him, and then he saw her at the edge of the fog, just barely visible, was a woman, beautiful, with long dark hair that flowed down her back. She stood motionless, her eyes locked onto his, her lips curling into a smile. But something was wrong. The lower half of her body was hidden in the fog, obscured by the swirling mist. "Who are you?" Matthew's voice trembled. She didn't answer. Instead, she began to move toward him, her smile widening, revealing sharp, needle-like teeth. Matthew stumbled back, the flashlight slipping from his grasp and scattered to the ground. The fog thickened. In that moment of panic, he saw a glint of scales, the sinuous coil of a serpent's body emerging from the mist. The Norno. Matthew turned and ran, his chest pounding in as his heart started beating. But the fog was disoriented. Every direction looked the same, and whispers followed him, growing louder, more insistent. "Matthew, come to me." He tripped, falling dead hard onto the gravel. When he looked up, she was there, towering him, her serpentine body coiling around his legs, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "Stay with me, Matthew." Her voice was sweet lullaby, pulling him into the darkness. The last thing he saw before the world went black was her face, impossibly close, her sharp teeth glistening as she whispered one final time, "Forever." To be continued.